So welcome everyone to Focusing on Impact. We've got a really exciting session today and a really interesting panel. We've had an initial discussion before this, and I think there's going to be lots of really interesting aspects that we're going to cover today. We're going to be looking at impact in customer-led organisations like Habito, who are B Corp. We've got a community-focused organisation like Depop, and then we'll be thinking about what happens when you're, become a really large organisation and in maturity like Farfetch or like Bupa. So we're going to kick off by introducing ourselves. So I'm Ali. I'm a senior product manager at Flow Health. And for the 50% of you who don't have periods, Flow Health is a cycle tracker, helping women to track cycles, 43 million active users a month, track their cycles worldwide using Flow. And I manage the Flow Health Assistant, which is our chatbot helping women understand their symptoms and cycles and know their bodies better. Prior to Flow, I worked at Bupa for 7 years in various product roles, in a venture, across wellbeing apps, virtual GPs, even doing service design in care homes at one point. And prior to that, I was in the old world of innovation at Cancer Research UK. So I'll pass over to Isla.
Hi, I'm Isla Cooper. I am Senior Product Manager at Habito. So they are an online mortgage broker, but they also have their own mortgage products, and I look after that side of the business, so our lending platform, kind of internal conveyancing, but also external kind of intermediaries being able to apply for those products. Before that, I worked for Funding Circle, but the European part of the business in Germany and the Netherlands, and then a prop tech in kind of shortlets. I started my career in Accenture, so kind of come from a consulting background, have that experience of the big corporates, and then also kind of startups and scale-ups.
Good morning, I'm Victor. I'm lead product manager in Farfetch. For those of you that don't know us, we are a global luxury platform connecting boutiques and customers. And I look after the retention marketing products. So we're trying to personalize the retention experience through CRM loyalty channels. And today is Black Friday, so I'm happy to be here, but I'm a bit nervous and see how the sales will go. I hope all of you that work in e-commerce are in the same situation as me, but I think it will be a good day.
Hey everyone, I'm Mohit. I'm Senior Product Manager at Depop. Depop is a circular fashion marketplace. I lead effort on community experience, basically building out help and support function to help our community who face any issues on the Depop platform. Before this, I've worked across industries in prop tech, in retail marketplaces and travel. I started my product management career in India with an online travel marketplace called Make My Trip. Moved on to Amazon, then landed here in London, worked with a startup called Spotter Home, and now at Depop. So that's me.
Great, thank you everyone. So when we started talking about impact between us, we quickly realised that impact means different things to different people, and it also means different things in different types of organisation and based on the size of your organisation. So I wanted to ask each of the panellists, what does impact mean to you? So Isla, at Habito, in a really customer-led organisation, what does Habito sort of perceive as impact?
So I think it definitely is a very customer-focused organisation. So it's about the impact you can have on the customers and I guess, but also more broadly on kind of society and changing behaviours. And yeah, as you mentioned before, we are a B Corp, which means that we are legally committed to put, I think it's people and planet, our kind of impact on people and planet on the same level as profit. So that's quite a hard thing to get and a hard thing to maintain, but it means that it's kind of embedded in our culture that it's not just about making the most revenue and hitting conversion targets. It's also about what can we do to make, well, for us it's home buying, making that process a better for the customer, but also then more widely, how can we positively impact the environment and society in general?
And how about you, Victor? Farfetch?
Yeah, I think we have impact at two levels, to be honest. There's one level of impact that is more like revenue focused, let's say. We have quite aggressive growth targets, and we measure that through top line revenue, let's say. But just building on what Ayla was saying, I think we also have impact when it comes to the luxury fashion industry. So we are very focused at helping boutiques to reach a global audience through our platform. So I think that's something we measure as well to try to understand how can we help the luxury industry overall. When we transform this into product objectives, it's a bit different though. I think we're very focused on the growth targets rather than how do we help the industry. But I think we can talk about more in the panel today.
And how about you, Mohit?
I mean, just adding to what Victor and Ayla have built upon, at Depop it's more about community because we are a community-driven marketplace. So, and it has a knock-on effect on other aspects as well. So what your community cares about, you also care about, and that's from where we take inspiration for our impact. Of course, we are a business. We have our growth targets. We have our let's say revenue targets. But again, we work backwards from community. So that's our inspiration of impact.
Yeah, we were reflecting, because I come from Bupa, which is a very mature, obviously, organisation, founded in the 1940s. And Bupa, actually the private healthcare insurance market is in fact in decline. So when you're a big organisation like that, your impact at a business level is almost about damage control because you're trying to protect market share. Whereas now I'm at Flow, which is massively growing at quite a rate. A big focus at Flow is going to be, really high growth of trial subscriptions, profitability, and then switching to things like retention. So it is very different, I think, when you're in a big kind of mature corporate and you're trying to protect your position, as opposed to startup that's scaling fast, trying to seize the market. So yeah, I think it can be very different, and also, as we're saying, the culture of the organisation plays a big part in how you define impact. So if you're going to make impact as a product manager, I think what's really clear is that you have to know what dial you're trying to shift, so how you measure impact, and the measurement side is extremely important. So Victor, how do you go about measuring impact at Farfetch?
I think measurability is something that it's quite a challenge in the customer field overall, especially when you look at different channels that are very affected by the privacy challenges we have now. IDFA, I think most of you will be affected by those as well. So I think measuring it's more and more complicated. I think when it's trying to understand what are the different levers that you can touch on the customer journey to understand what impact this is having. But I think the framework that we follow is, first of all, trying to understand, okay, what are the North Star metrics for my organization? If we're all on the same journey of getting growth, this means, for instance, a revenue target that we must hit in the next quarters. And then from there, we try to translate this into our product or problem space. What metrics can we move or move the needle for those metrics to actually affect that North Star metric? So in my retention world, this would be things such as repurchase rate, for instance, or retention rate overall, that then I know that it will have an impact on the overall revenue. So it's about understanding organization North Star metrics to then understand your problem space metrics and then have a very clear path forward when it comes to, okay, this is my hypothesis, that's how I'm going to validate them. And if they are successful, this is how we are going to roll it out. So it's very important that you have an end-to-end visibility on that, because sometimes we forget that when we start product development, we started because we focused on certain impact that we wanted to target, right? And it's very important you have a plan overall since the start of it.
So do you have company-led OKRs? Is it top-down?
I think this depends hugely on the size of your organization, right? Mm-hmm. So I started my role 1.5 years ago, and of course Farfetch is a 10-year-old company. We are quite big now, so there are some OKRs that you can use to then drive your impact. But I know that maybe some of you work in a startup field, and then you are the ones that are maybe asked to think of what these North Star metrics are. No? In our case, in Farfetch, we have OKRs. They are 1 year long. They are very clear vision, and from there you have the ask as a product manager to actually think of what are the metrics, what are the different objectives you would then waterfall from the yearly OKRs. But I know that, for instance, you guys are working away from OKRs. I think you were telling us about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we used to use OKRs, and similarly we have kind of company level metrics, and then within each crew kind of have their own metrics. But we've moved away from OKRs to input metrics. Rather than I guess kind of setting those goals, we kind of work in what we call bets. I guess it's taking kind of small bets, small things you can test, or not necessarily small actually. They are kind of different sizes depending on what it is. But it's about something you can control that will obviously influence the outcome, but rather than focusing on getting this many mortgage submissions or this rate of conversion, it's focusing on those inputs that we can tweak and change, and actually what's that experience and behaviour that we can influence. So we do have those kind of company level metrics, which we call hero inputs. And so I think they're trust, clarity, and convenience. So that is kind of at the core of everything. And then we kind of filter down, similar to you, that whatever our bets are should contribute towards those goals. So we've got those input metrics, and so they do kind of differ between teams. So, for example, in the growth team, they'll have much kind of smaller, more nimble bets that are kind of quicker things, whereas in the lending team we tend to have slightly bigger, longer term bets that maybe take 3 to 6 months to see the impact, just because we're waiting for getting submissions and that sort of stuff, which takes a longer time, whereas in growth they might be checking if this button's had an impact on conversion, which is a much quicker thing to test, but it's still all following the same sort of methodology of having that focus on how can we help the customer, how can we influence their behaviour and help them along that journey.
And what are the challenges of measurement? You sit in quite a different space in terms of your product area. How do you do? Are there any big challenges when you're not managing a feature that is all about trials and sales and revenue?
I think the biggest challenge for me has been, how do you quantify that impact which you want to drive, right? How you measure it, and most of the time you may not have the right metrics or right data available to support your hypothesis. So quantification of that impact, and I'll pick up an example from community experience space, right? We want to make experience as seamless and as easy for our users as much as we can. But how are we going to measure it? Is it customer effort score? Is it customer satisfaction score? But both of these are reactive metrics, if you know what I mean. Like, user has gone through that journey, user has faced that issue, and then they'll come to you and say, oh, my experience was not that great. But what could be an input to that, right? Can you make it happen in lesser number of steps? Can you make it more easy, more automated, more seamless? Or maybe you skip the entire step, and let's say if a user has faced an issue, you just refund it. Like, and what kind of delight it will create. So I think that's what, all those things are qualitative in nature, and you go back, you ask your users, okay, how did you feel about it? And then they respond to you and say, oh, I was delighted, or this is total failure, I don't even like it one bit. So I think quantification of that and aggregation of that is one of the biggest challenges which I face.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've worked in a venture at Bupa where we didn't have all of the measurements in place. We were sort of just starting up. We had to rely on pretty scrappy Google Analytics. It definitely didn't hook back into, all of the other sort of data systems we had, which were quite archaic, which again, a lot of big organizations suffer from. It can be challenging when you don't have really great ways of measuring impact. I feel very lucky at Flow to sit at my desk and look at my beautiful dashboards on Looker and be able to see exactly what's going on. But often that's not the case, particularly in big organizations that are undergoing pretty hefty digital transformation experiences. Moving on. Let's talk about, I wanted to dive a bit more into the customer support side of things and how you measure it, because you're dealing with people who are maybe not very happy about their experience with Depop? Is it about trying to win them back and retain them, or is it about brand impact? How does that work?
I'll answer this question in two parts. One is how we measure, and then is that the right approach or not? So we keep measuring the customer support space or the impact in customer support space through user satisfaction surveys. But as I said, it's a reactive measure, and it comes very late into the picture, right? Once you have your issue resolved, then you will receive a survey, and then you have to submit how you feel about it. In past we have relied on NPS surveys as well, which actually measure what people are talking about your company as a whole. I personally, and this might trigger a debate, but I personally feel these are sort of very, very reactive, and you don't have many actionables out of it. Like your customers are not feeling very great about your product, but what's the actionable? What can I improve about it? So you have to granularize it at every level. So maybe you measure customer effort score for every funnel or every workflow which you have put forward to the users, and then you start thinking, okay, can I make it easy? Can I make it more seamless? And the other question you should ask is, can I actually? Is there a need to be reactive to this, or can I go proactive and stop this from happening at all? So why should any person face an issue with their item not being delivered? There is no point in facing that kind of negative experience. Why should shipping prices be so high? Why should sellers not able to list? So can I eliminate that problem altogether instead of relying on those reactive things? So I think that's where we want to shift in future, to be honest.
Yeah, it was pretty similar actually when I think back to like working in Bupa on like the care homes business. Like a really big thing was the NPS score, and people having a positive impact and trying to almost damage control like negative impacts and dealing with those customers. So moving on from measurement, I think a big challenge with impact is moving at pace, moving at speed, as kind of the terminology goes, and it's how you get a balance of delivering impactful features with a massive backlog. So, Isla, how do you approach this at Habito?
I think it's always a kind of a balance, as everything in product is, but it's about making sure that you've kind of carved out some time for those things that are on the backlog that maybe you didn't do in MVP, or the tech debt and the engineering improvements that you want to make. So at Habito, when we used to be in OKRs, we would have one OKR every quarter for engineering improvements, just that. Whereas now we don't have it kind of so formally, but we always make sure, so we carve out some time. When I was at Funding Circle, we'd make sure that 10% of our capacity each sprint was dedicated to that kind of tech debt work. So I think it's just about balancing it out. And also, so at Habito, I guess especially in the lending career, so we work on kind of slightly bigger, maybe kind of 3 to 6 month projects generally. And so we might have for one quarter we'll be focused on this project, for the next quarter we'll focus on engineering improvements, how we can reduce our support burden, that sort of work, and then we'll go back to doing another project. And I think just keeping it mixed up also means that people, I guess, feel like we are making progress on everything. Obviously we can't do everything in parallel, but maybe we can do it bit by bit, and then the engineers feel like they're still getting a variety of work and that the tech debt isn't just being forgotten about. So I think it's just about keeping everything kind of in that constant prioritization. It's just ongoing, making sure you're having the right impact, but also thinking longer term, not just what can I do that's going to get us more customers in right now. Actually, some of this tech debt stuff, it's going to take 6 months to fix this, but in the long term, that's what we need to do. At the moment, we're actually just about to start a tech migration, so we're kind of moving from one programming language to another. And so that's for Q1, that is our 100% focus. And that's not an easy conversation to have with other parts of the business when they're like, we just want to make this change to the policy, we just want to do that. But we've decided as a business that is our focus for Q1. And so it's just about balancing that out. And obviously, if something super urgent comes in, then we'll have to reprioritise and reconsider if there's someone else that can help. But we've set those priorities and we need to kind of stick to them, really.
Yeah. How about you, Victor? How do you approach prioritisation?
I think pretty similar, to be honest. I was just thinking that sometimes the challenge comes when you started the planning, you start the year, everything goes well, but then you have to be constantly monitoring the impact that you're making on the business, right? And sometimes you see that actually your hypotheses, you validate them and you see that you are not achieving the impact that you wanted. I think these gray areas of actually, okay, what do we do now? How do we reprioritize? Is when you see if you have good mechanism and good governance overall in your product management team, right? To be able to take different decisions that maybe go against the planning cycle, no? And here something that has worked for us very well is to be really on top of OKRs. So we have like monthly meetings between the product team to really understand what's the progress we're making, and then you can start doing some potential trade-offs there in these initial conversations, no? But I think also in my experience, to make sure that this works well, I think you have to have a buy-in from your overall organization, from a vertical hierarchical strategy point of view, no? Like if your director of product, VP, C-level are not okay with reprioritizing things constantly, then you have a very hard job as a product manager to really show how you can shift the strategy to then get to the yearly impact, no? So at Farfetch, we're quite used at reprioritizing on a quarterly basis, but of course, it's a challenge that I think product managers have on actually conveying this message of why do we have to reprioritize certain things, no? And it's a gray area that I think most of us try to navigate how we can.
Yeah. And how do you manage technical debt, Mohit?
Pretty similar. I mean, I agree with what Ayla said. You have to create some space around, how will you solve technical debt problem? Maybe in your quarterly planning, or in your sprint planning, or in your yearly planning. It doesn't matter where it's at, but you have to make that space. And then you have to put a layer of prioritization, within that tech debt as well, because you want to pick up things which will make more impact first, which will unblock you, most out of that list of things which you want to improve. The other point is like there could be like big stones within technical debt as well, like where you foresee if I take this path, I'm gonna get blocked 6 months down the line, 9 months down the line, and then you start advocating that okay, we need to dedicate this much bandwidth to this project, but we'll take it up at this point in time, and you start evangelizing that thought across teams, across your product hierarchy, across your tech hierarchy as well, and you align people, you make them agree to it, that if this does not happen, the rest of the roadmap will go for a toss. So that's one way to influence, but I think the key is how you prioritize within that tech debt and then start creating space for it.
Yeah, because at a certain point, technical debt definitely can start to slow you down, like your speed of delivery. If you've created a platform at the start that was like easy, quick to build, and then you start to rack up more and more technical debt, and it gets longer and longer to like deliver things. You then have to, at some point, I guess, like you're saying, make a really big decision. Right, we're going to now migrate to a new platform.
Yeah,
this is it.
And I think it's really important that people understand why. So I think that we had kind of a similar thing at Hubspot where we released kind of 3 MVPs back to back in the lending group, and then we had this kind of ever-growing technical debt, so we kind of said one quarter that we're just going to focus on this, but we also did kind of an explanation of why we've got to that point and what the impact is, so that people can understand it's not just that we want to make it kind of the wires a bit better. It's actually going to have a tangible impact on our delivery timescales, as you're saying.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm thinking about this as well with our chatbot platform, which has been served as well for nearly 2-3 years. And now, coming to a point where we're like, is this going to be the right thing for us to reach 5,000, different chats for our users? Probably not. So we're probably going to have that, tough decision very soon before we start building things into the existing platform that are taking longer and longer to deliver. So I think as product managers, obviously COVID was quite a big change of direction, particularly in healthcare companies where there was suddenly a massive shift in our priorities. This happened when I was at Bupa, and it definitely happened at Flow as well. So what happens when your strategy suddenly changes? Victor?
I joined Farfetch April 2020. So I think I joined when COVID was starting here in the UK. We were all working from home already. I think how it changed our strategy with what I could see talking with some colleagues is that out of a sudden, I think from e-commerce perspective, it was not the right moment to actually be very aggressive acquiring customers. It didn't feel right for the first weeks of COVID at least, no? So I think there was a focus on retention, first of all. And then the second focus for us is that building on our platform strategy, we wanted to help our boutiques. No? So we wanted to help our boutiques to have this global reach of customers that they could maybe leverage. If you were in Italy, you had a lockdown, and maybe you could sell somewhere else that they didn't have a lockdown. No? So we doubled down on our platform strategy there. We focus on retention. And then I think we've had like a success story here of growth in the last months, thanks to our platform. No? However, I think it was very important to have this mechanism of constantly monitor the different OKRs and KPIs, and we were already used to reprioritizing. I think that's why I didn't see a huge shift. But previously, I worked at O2, big corporate. So I think when we started seeing COVID coming, when I was still working there at Q1 2020, it was harder for us to take decisions, if I'm honest. Like I could see how we don't have those mechanisms. The organization was not used to taking decisions fast. So I think we struggled a lot in that condition. But then if you are working in a setting where everyone is used to reprioritizing and having these types of conversations, it's way easier to navigate the uncertainty in that case.
Yeah, definitely at Bupa. I was at Bupa when COVID hit. We were not used to suddenly pivoting direction very fast. But it taught the organisation an awful lot in a very short space of time. And now, there was very little, I'd say, agile culture back then, and now it's sort of really kind of perforating through Bupa. I think it stems from the fact that there was, suddenly a big, pivot with, how on earth do we support a bunch of people who can't access any healthcare? And because even private healthcare was completely switched off until about June, when they started opening up the hospitals. So there were a lot of people who were waiting for operations in the private hospitals that had never been seen before. And so I was thinking, okay, so what are we going to do with these people, who are paying for their insurance, can't access anything? So, there was an awful lot of work to become a much more agile kind of organisation. I also wanted to touch on, in this subject, like the regulatory environment and the challenges that does bring. Isla, what's been your experience of this?
Well, I think regulation always comes first. It's a non-negotiable. It has to be. So I think as long as you prioritise in that way, then it shouldn't kind of have too big an impact on you, because no regulation will come out of the blue. You'll always have plenty of time where it's coming. So as long as you've thought about that in your planning, and I guess it's just, if you've got kind of set timelines and stuff like that, especially for regulation, there always is. But so you've done it far enough in advance. But even if you get to near that deadline and you can't do it, you're going to have to remove scope of something else, because that regulation can never shift. So that just needs to be your number one priority. So in a lot of ways, it actually makes it easier, because it's a non-negotiable focus. So everything else has to kind of work around it.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah.
You should know what big regulations are coming down, and be knowing how to deal with that as a product manager. So I thought we'd now sort of turn our attention to talk about experimentation culture. I think this has been a really big development in product manager over the last kind of 5, maybe even 10 years in some organisations. And it's really, I've really loved coming into an experimentation culture at Flow, because it finally kind of gives you that ability to like fail fast, move on with your life, try the next thing. So do you have an experimentation culture in your organisation? Mohit, why don't you kick us off?
Short answer, we are getting there. Long answer, I think, see, it depends where you are as an organization. If whether you're a startup, you're a scale-up, or a mature company, and that defines the room to experiment. Because as a startup, if you're trying to find product market fit, you're still pivoting your business. You're still trying to get that validation of your business model. Whereas as a scale-up, you have found that product market fit, but you are trying to improve on different things. And whereas, let's say, a big company like Amazon, where a product manager is just trying to improve, very small improvement in their funnel to drive that 0.2% of conversion. So it's very different across spectrum. The other thing is, which I feel, how we should think about experimentation is certainty of our hypothesis, right? So there will be things which it's like a no-brainer. We should have this. This will make the funnel seamless or make the workflow seamless. You should go ahead and start, building on it. I mean, you should not, plan for a lot of stuff around it, but you can start with MVP. And then there are hypotheses which you're not very certain about it. Oh, what if, let's say, I change the pricing at this stage instead of checkout? Or what if, I start discounting right from the search result page? So there you don't know like how the customer will react, and you just need to go ahead, do that experiment, and get certain about it. So I think these are the two factors which we are working towards right now at Depop.
And Isla, how does this work? You've mentioned to us input metrics that you guys use at Habitone.
Yes, I think it's kind of embedded in that culture that we're kind of taking bets, and we do this on a regular basis. We have weekly business reviews where we go through kind of new bets or existing ones that have got an update and things like that. And it's part of that culture to just try new things and work on hypotheses, as you said. And sometimes that might be just tweaking a button or something that, as you kind of mentioned, that small stuff. Sometimes it might be we're going to have a big bet on changing our affordability policy or something that's much bigger on the lending side. So it can kind of change. I think it's just part of that culture. And even in those business reviews, we have these kind of a mantra that we say at the beginning of every business review, and one of that is that we're here to learn, and the success is measured by how much we've learned. So the success is not measured about whether you were right or wrong, it's about learning. So it is that kind of fail-fast culture, and actually the learning is more important than getting things right.
Excellent. So I think we'll probably have one last question from me, and then I can see we've got some questions in Slido to answer. So I think we all agree that team and organisational culture can play a really big part in impact as product managers. So Victor, how do you create a culture that really moves at pace?
I think that's super relevant, right? And for instance, I have some friends working at Meta or Facebook, and all what they say all the time is like the impact that they deliver for the business in the last quarter. They just care about this, and then they speak about other things. So I think this talks a lot about their culture. I don't know if we have some people from Facebook here, but this talks a lot about their culture, right? I think when it comes to organization I'm part of, people are very impact-driven, but they're also driven by other things. Like our culture is very important as well in terms of the values we have, the collaboration that we have between teams, right? So I think how you deliver the impact is super important for our organization. So it's a lot about collaborating with different teams and having like shared responsibilities and shared goals between teams. And in order to create that, something that our engineering teams and data science teams think that product managers are very helpful on is actually how to focus on that impact. No? So when we build the roadmaps, it's very, very useful for them to show how what they will build, data science models, engineering tools, will actually drive this impact. So they are kind of outsourcing a bit this responsibility of strategically thinking about the impact on the product manager. And then if you're successfully driving that impact for them and setting up the strategy, is how the culture will then put you in the position of owning a bit how to drive the impact in your area. No? But I think it changes a lot depending on the organization, so it might not work for everyone.
Yeah, Isla, how does what do you think culture plays a part with making impact?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. So it's kind of the heart of a business, really, and obviously we all have our values written on our About Us page on the website, but it's actually about, is that what it's like to work for that company? Is it, say, embedded in what you're doing every day? And I think a lot of that comes from the top, but then also empowering those at the bottom to do it as well. So whether that's just allowing people to have different groups and different things, and just empowering everyone to have those open conversations and to challenge, especially within product management, allowing your engineers to challenge your ideas and not feeling like you're just giving them a recipe of what to do. Actually, it's a two-way conversation, and it's all about communication and collaboration and all that sort of stuff, of working together, and those cross-functional teams. That's the whole point of having those cross-functional teams, is so that you are all designing stuff and all coming up with those ideas, and not just kind of the product manager being that gatekeeper. It's about working as a team.
Yeah, and I think having an inspiring vision as a company at a company-led level, also really helps, because if you're not clear on, particularly in health organisations, you really need a good medical strategy. Being this is where we sit on mental health, this is where we sit on women's issues, this is where we sit on the menopause. In a health organisation, when you don't have that, and this is on the customer-led side, it's really difficult to measure impact if you don't know where you stand on big issues.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd now move on to Slido to see some of the questions that we've got. Top question voted is, why did you move away from OKR to impact metrics? I think that's to Isla.
Well, I guess that's probably a big one for the boss, but I think it's more about making sure that we are focusing on what we can do, kind of the customer and the controllable stuff. So not just focusing purely on the outputs and the kind of some number of submissions, number of the conversion rates, all that stuff. I think if you focus too much on those, then it kind of distracts you from what's those things that you can control and those things you tweak. I think often it's just a slightly different focus, but ultimately they're the same thing. In OKRs, you're obviously looking at what you can tweak to impact those measurements, but I think it's just a slightly different focus, and making sure that we are, I guess it's part of that experimentation culture that we were talking about, and making those bets, and it all kind of falls into the same thing. It's just a slightly different way of putting OKRs. They're not kind of in contradiction. They're just slightly different methods. But I think part of the reason was to make sure that we were always focused on those customers, and our hero inputs are clarity, convenience, and trust, and making sure that they were at the heart of everything that we're doing.
Great. A question on Farfetch. So, what is the vision that Farfetch is working towards, and how do you choose it to be the Farfetch vision?
I hope Farfetch people don't think that I'm not providing a good answer, but the vision here is to create the global luxury platform. So we started with fashion, but we want to be the platform for luxury, And if you use other e-commerce, you see how luxury use cases sometimes are not that well thought of. So Farfetch will be your one-stop shop for anything luxury in the future, How this helps us in then building our roadmap is that now we are very fashion-oriented as the only category we're working on, but something we already communicated to the market is that we're launching a new category, the beauty category, next half year. And this means that when we build products, we think about platform and being multi-category in the next years. So our products don't have only to cater fashion use cases, but rather be focused on the customer as a luxury customer overall.
That's great. So we've got so many questions here. I'll give one to Mohit now. How do you do road mapping? Do you prioritize features or problems? If so, how do you measure impact versus risk?
I think all the words used here, road mapping, impact, risk, features, are part of an overall roadmap, I would say. So we prioritize problems over solutions. We don't go into solutionizing mode. Rather, we start framing problems. How can we help our community? How can we make it easier for our users to buy? How can we make it easier for our sellers to list or sellers to sell? So that's the starting point, and then you start answering those questions. So a framework which I keep using for myself is 5 whys. Why is this a problem?
Yeah.
Why you feel this is important? Why we should care about this? So you start iterating on that one, and that gives you visibility into what the problem statement is. Once you have that clarity, then you start into what could be the probable solutions for this, which comes really, really late into the entire road mapping process. And then you say, is this the best solution? Can I strip it down? Can I make it, more lean, more easy? Can I have an MVP version of it? Do I need to do all of this stuff? So that's the iterations I take on road mapping, and then you figure out, is there any dependency of on this roadmap, or if I'm trying to solve it in a certain way, will I be blocked somewhere? And that becomes the risk. So problems, probable solutions, lean version of solutions, dependencies, and risk. That's probably my framework.
That's great. I think that another one for Isla. So you mentioned bets. Do they align to top-level business objectives? How do you avoid bets being random?
Yeah, so we have our kind of hero inputs, which are those trust, clarity, convenience, but then we also have company bets. So they'll basically be, I think we've got 4 at the moment of our basically top priorities across the business. So because we've got kind of several different product lines, which ones are we focused on? And generally we do those on a quarterly basis, or they might be half yearly. So that's setting the company level priorities, and then when we do our bets, they have to align to those. So we're not just going, I'm going to test if this button, if we change it to pink, is that going to make a difference? We have to have a reason that we're doing it, and so it has to line up with either that we want to get customers helping with the home buying journey, the kind of end to end. That's one of our focuses at the moment, is that whole journey. So actually, is it going to impact that metric? They're not kind of random. We just pick what we're going to do. They all filter up. So say it's the same as doing OKRs or some other level where you always have your kind of pyramid of bets, really, or metrics.
I'm afraid I think we've now run out of time. Well, one last question. Okay, so the other top voted question I will ask this to Victor. So how do you weight up impact on old users versus new users? So old returning users versus new. So good question.
That's a good question, and maybe a good framework that we're not actually using, but to be honest, we are not weighting differently. We are focusing rather on problem spaces. And I think problem spaces sometimes look more like acquisition or retention spaces, but we don't have like a certain weighting that by default we will like assign to acquisition or retention. No? We rather look at the opportunity and how this will affect the customer. So we don't have any weighting in our roadmap, but I'm curious to know more about this framework.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that I think, I definitely encountered at Bupa, where we would create new products and our massive focus was like, can we get as many customers onto this app as possible? And then we'd be like, oh no, the retention's not great. Often you end up focusing on the acquisition side, and then the retention is like can be a secondary thought. I also think it depends again on like the scale up, sort of startup scale up. Like again, a lot of startups were kind of, you're really focused on acquisition, and then you often turn to, we really need to now look at engagement and retention here. I don't think I've got a solution to this question. It was a very good one. So I think that's all the time we've got today. I can see we've had tons of questions on here. So please do come up to us in the break. All of us would love to have a chat on this subject. So thank you very much, everyone.